Captain America Super Soldier is a much easier game to talk about than a lot of games I cover on my channel. It's a straightforward single-player title from the time when those weren't used as a shield for live service slop or grindathon loot-based systems designed to appeal to corporate trends. It's also a much easier story to talk about than many, because there aren't years of deep cross-media lore to excavate, or deep, morally nuanced dilemmas with no clear answer to have to consider. Captain America punches fascism, so when he learns the location of a sci-fi fascism castle, he goes to punch it. It may be a movie tie-in game, but unlike so many of those whose potential gets bogged down by some combination of time, budget, or manpower constraints, this one has enough polish and enough focus in its design to keep it a fun and breezy experience whose flaws are minimal enough that they don't really matter in the big picture. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy harder games to talk about, despite and/or because of all of those listed features. I've written more than the usual thesis paper's word count of those, and that one is honestly one of my favorite videos I've ever made. And even with the issues in those, I did get value out of the experiences of playing and discussing them here on Baneshake. However, the easy option felt like a nice change. Pick a game I have loved for years for loose topical relevance, enjoy it again. Recipe for success. And then motherfucking OBS undid hours of progress by deciding, nah, let's absolutely ruin this clown's current video file. It would have been no biggie if it had just been in between bits of punching goons, but unfortunately it was centered around a significant boss fight that I think just truly shines as a highlight of the game's design and would be sorely missed from my video. I don't know what's gotten into OBS recently. While I normally edit and capture card record running it on Mac, I was also attempting to set it up in PC mode for a big project I'm prepping for the very near future, but had to resort to other methods, as I could not get that program to behave. That's right, my shitpost made on a whim to imply the punchline, "The Wookiee left," is apropos of something. Subscribe to see where that's leading. So with the wind out of my sails, I could either choose to start anew to redo that progress, or I could shelve that version for now and fall back on my tried and true love for unique handheld ports. And since you clicked on this video, I will trust you figured out my decision. In addition to the main console version of Super Soldier on PS3 and Xbox 360, sadly lacking a PC port, there are versions on Wii and 3DS, which I have not played but do appear to be rough equivalents to each other at a glance, and then today's port for the veteran Nintendo DS, which, as discussed with LEGO Star Wars 3 previously, had a deceptively long shelf life even after its new 3D successor hit the shelves the same year as Cap's movie and game. This version was developed by Kryptonite, a developer I genuinely do respect despite having mixed successes just within my coverage. God damn, I am being heavily self-referential here. I'll put links in my description or whatever, but this is getting silly even by my standards. Like they often did for the weaker handheld hardware, Grippy adapted the basic concept into a 2D platformer, and honestly really did a banger job on this one too. Though again, I'll assume you already knew that was my takeaway because you had the intellectual curiosity to read my title already. The overall story setup is pretty close to the console version, where Captain America discovers Hydra operations have taken over Castle Zemo to make world-conquering science experiments, so he goes to fight several Hydra villains and put an end to it. That game sort of was canon to the MCU for a while, at least. though its canonicity was on shaky ground by Winter Soldier, and I'm pretty sure got decanonized by Civil War. Though I am far from an MCU lore master, do not quote me on it, as I could also be a dumbass. I won't do a full story breakdown at the end as I often do, considering the fascies all get punched and exploded and lose by the end in a very predictable and yet satisfying manner, but I will highlight the few differences between this and the PS3 version, assuming I didn't just forget after not replaying fully. See addendum, could be a dumbass. Is Cap interacting more directly with Baron Zemo by radio, as he didn't like Hydra stealing his house, instead of just being relegated to collectible video reels there? The story does play out nicely, reusing the voice work of the other versions with great audio quality. Certainly a necessity, since they brought back so much of the movie's cast for the job, and little recreations of their faces, all of which do the job sufficiently enough, though Peggy's seems to be both the most accurate and the most detailed. Can't imagine why the lil geek artist working for a game developer would be more interested in drawing Haley Atwell than the dudes. The game in motion first gave me the impression of the fluid movement of both Assassin's Creed II Discovery and Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which Kryptonite had literally made just in the prior 2 years, though some of that has been reined in for more accurate and predictable controls than that Spidey could manage, thankfully. There really was no reason to keep the momentum system in place for this one. Certainly boosting my first impression is just how high octane out of the gate it is. Cap just casually leaps out of a plane onto an enemy blimp and then into hostile territory to introduce the tutorial. All video game tutorials for the rest of time are welcome to casually have the main character beating up Nazis on a blimp in my book. It would certainly liven up Cooking Mama, to say the least. Combat also bears more than a few similarities to Shatdim, especially when you get to juggling enemies in the air, but there are substantial additions and changes to make this feel both like an authentic Captain America combat system, and to bear a few spiritual, though not literal, similarities to the console port. In addition to normal attacks leaving enemies in range to combo, and attacks to knock back enemies for more breathing room, blocking with, deflecting with, and throwing the shield are obviously instrumental tools, and it is their inclusion with the rest that makes this combat system shine. You can toss your protection to one side and start pounding away at someone else to multitask, and juggling enemies in front of your rapidly returning shield is always fun to pull off, though it obviously requires accuracy. So if you see me randomly tossing my shield nowhere in particular in my footage, it was definitely for that reason and not, as the young people would say, a skill issue. No sir. There are also 2 combat meter options, at least a little reminiscent of the focus moves in the console port. Your meter builds up as you get hits and with your combo, and decreases a little when you take hits. If you can get it halfway, Cap runs off screen into the foreground for a super move upon activation, bouncing his shield around to dish out enough damage to any non-boss enemies for an instant KO. If you get it all the way up, he enters a special Patriot mode where he sees blue and does more damage with minor time dilation. Despite being the purportedly premium move, I tended to prefer the first over the latter. Sure, that one is limited to only the enemies already around, but it was guaranteed hits over the alternative where Cap still takes damage normally and has to manually dish out pain to anyone he wants hurting, not to mention he has a few moments of come down after his berserker rage, so it felt much less effective despite requiring more build-up. I used both as needed, neither are bad options, but the first one was far more effective. I will give this Patriot mode some credit though. At the end of the game, when he sees Red Skull and is blinded by so much hatred for Nazis that he just enters this mode, meter be damned, one hit KOing every Hydra agent in between him and his target, well, that definitely justified the inclusion. Enemies are all easily visually distinctive and escalate appropriately through the game. One low-level Hydra thug will be delightful, easy pickings for a curb stomp battle, but by the end, contending with multiple elite, tanky higher-ups and grenadiers and snipers will require you to be at your absolute best. But the combat never feels unfairly challenging, per se, though there is one exception, not necessarily due to the combat, but one extra element, but I'll come back to that. See, I'm too excited to tell you about the leggy tank fellas. Unlike the main port's Wolfensteinish, big, horrific mechs, machines grafted onto humans at the cost of being in subtle but noticeable pain or discomfort, this port's mechs are big ol' bipedal tanks, and they are just so delightful. If you don't see the appeal in big goofy tanks just stomping around, you and I are very different people. Even Iron Cross in this version gets to be a more badass version of this design. There's also technically another robot that felt worth mentioning. It's this little tiny, I guess you could still call it a tank, except the whole things, they look like little robotic head crabs, and they cling to you and they do this weird thrusting thing before exploding. The whole thing's very uncomfortable. 10 out of 10 enemy design. The boss fights also specifically play to combat's strengths. Baron von Strucker's multiple encounters are more of a duel, fighting another human but with a few unique moves thanks to his specialized robot hand, whereas others like Iron Cross and Arnim Zola's robot body have more focus on classic dodging projectiles moves that boss fights love so much, though even between these two, Zola's robot fight is much more focused on deflecting projectiles as much as possible, so they still feel quite distinct. Madam Hydra technically also has an encounter, but it's more about platforming, so we'll touch base on that later. The sore spot I mentioned is one single encounter where you have to defend Bucky from enemies while he types away at a computer. That classic video game trope. That always sucks. Unfortunately, enemies spawn on either side pretty close to him. It's hard to keep everyone aggroed on you instead of him, and he has the hit points of, roughly speaking, an old sponge. So this one encounter requires the luck that elements fall into place for him to survive the whole time, more than actual skill can possibly provide. It wasn't deal-breakingly bad, and nowhere near Mysterio levels of unfair, but it was frustrating and took me 20 tries, including the same unskippable intro animations. Bucky, I'm starting to think you did deserve to get kidnapped and tortured and experimented upon and brainwashed into becoming a horrible killing machine against your own autonomy, the blood on your hands haunting you for the rest of your days. Lil bitch. Platforming was the part I liked least about the PS3 version, as it's mostly automated, with you hitting a single button with good timing, just for it to tell you whether you had good timing. But since we are fortunate enough for this setup, we actually get normal platforming here, and it's good. You can expect genre-typical things like wall jumping or those horizontal poles sticking out of walls that people put up just to invite parkour. And very early on, Cap unlocks a charged jump which can sometimes get you onto platforms in an unorthodox order, which even seems to have been deliberate by the devs to encourage exploration and even problem solving for some puzzles. And puzzles there are. Much of the platforming is figuring out where to go in what order to hit what switches, or where you need to throw your shield to activate things. And while none of this necessarily gets mind-bending, it did require that I remained mentally engaged. Madam Hydra's encounter, as mentioned, is more of a death trap obstacle course, but thankfully for me these traps seem to be a lot less lethal than they could have been, perhaps should have been, likely because they playtested it well enough to balance that section. Seriously, Bucky, how hard would it have been to work with a goddamn playtester? Now, much like combat having the one glaring hiccup, so too does platforming have one, though perhaps less worrisome. In a couple of areas, there is instant death slime that serves more as an annoyance than anything else. So while I could sometimes manage to kick Hydra into it, which is funny and maybe even recommended if, Hydra ever takes over in the real world, you never know. More often, it would just send me back far enough to have me grumbling under my breath because of a bad jump. This port also has brand new gameplay elements too. Most prominently, stealth. It is trial and error stealth, where getting spotted is an instant fail state, though I think they pulled this off very well to make stealth a proper puzzle of timing things correctly. Cap's takedown on human enemies is great. It's not only over the top and funny, but it also best communicates a takedown when the limitations of the art style might not work for simpler animations, and gives it the speed to keep from messing up your timing with the moving components of the whole encounter. Some cameras can be destroyed, while others simply have to be deactivated at the correct switch. Cameras will detect you instantly if you get within their cones, but humans have a slight margin of error. Now, this whole thing does remind me of Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery, where sightlines are implausibly short, but since it's needed for the gameplay to be fair and fun, I'm happy to accept function as the most important priority over realism. There are also auto-running segments, but I don't like these quite as much. You can jump and you can dash into enemies, and that's what you're doing now. Timing is often just odd, sending you into a gap where the presentation, like the background, straight up ceases because you couldn't see it in time, getting you staggered by enemies you couldn't react to in time, or in one baffling case, getting caught, stun-locked in a corner, which required I exit the game and continue from the main menu. There is a score counter up top, increased by picking up random military medals, but this does literally nothing. This score literally matters nowhere. There is no reason to even look at this number. If it let you at least control your own running too, these would be slightly better. And though they are far from awful, they feel like the least polished part of the game. And I suspect these were just sort of slapped in there later than other gameplay elements. If you removed these, nothing would be lost at all. The touchscreen was thankfully used more sparingly than the eldritch planescape that still haunts my nightmares from Shattered Dimensions' horrendous minigame. It's really only used for little actions for some immersion, stroking up and down for strong actions like lifting big things, turning wheel cranks in a circle, or punching specific places to break through. Throughout levels there are a handful of collectibles, though at a considerably more moderate pace than the console version, which slapped collectibles around every corner like they were trying to steal Ubisoft's girl. Conveniently, these are displayed on the touchscreen, so you know whether or not to be looking in each individual section. First off are captured GIs who all stand and salute you upon saving. If you get sent back to the last checkpoint after saving them, it replaces them with a see-through version to show you've already done that. "You have to let me go, Cap. The accident was only mostly your fault." Enough of these guys unlock various unlockable costumes from various comics. Then there are dossiers, which are actually quite well written, starting off rather funny. The first few show the squabbling between Red Skull, Zola, and Zemo, and highlight just how fickle, arbitrary, petty, and bluntly really moronic fascists can actually be. Like Zola demanding not only that Zemo provide Red Skull some pussy, but also the exact physical requirements of the woman down to a narrow range of height and an even narrower range of weight for, again, an egregiously demanded booty call. The next few involve Baron Strucker and Madame Hydra, getting to know each other too, in the nasty sense, but then further shows that this, too, is all just part of a power struggle to boost themselves higher in this hierarchy. The last few, though, take a turn for the harrowing, as they were left behind by a prisoner of war, watching his buddy, and then himself, be slowly tortured and modified into war machines at the bidding of Zola. There will also be upgrades to health or Cap's shield hidden in the mix, too. These are fairly naturally hidden, but in a way that rewards exploration, as going around blindly, I was able to find almost everything, which is sort of the point of video game collectibles in the first place, if you think about it. The thing that really makes this game stand out for me, besides the great gameplay, exploration, and all the other stuff I mentioned, is this stellar presentation. This game is the perfect balance of exaggerated, comic-y simplicity the DS needed it to be, with a surprising amount of detail all the same. Running through war-scarred villages as snow falls around, seeing massive operations taking place in the background of a level, even just a sheer amount of variety in what is barely more than just one location, all makes the game feel very visually fun to run around in. I've already praised the leg tanks, but all characters, allies, and enemies alike look perfect for what this game is going for, and the presentation excels at more than just visual designs. It has a great sense of humor about proceedings. Like when it's funny to smoosh a Nazi. Always, as it turns out. I mean, that's not all. Look at the work of art that is this clip. It also just knows when to be badass and cinematic, too. Right off the bat, the main menu screen goes hard AF, and there are so many great moments within that listing them feels less impactful than just showing you a few.
What's the matter, Liebchen? The kiss of Madame Hydra is too much for you?
We will be seeing him again soon enough.
Gameloft, For real, you deserve props for this one. Unfortunately, upon finishing the game, I was struck with the second worst thing about the game. The first being James Buchanan Barnes being made of paper mache. There is absolutely no way to enjoy post-game content. There is no chapter select. There is no new game plus. If you try to continue, it sends you back to the last checkpoint in the game, which is just climbing the rocket taking off from the castle with little more gameplay than a QTE. If you choose a new game, it just creates a new save in one of the available slots, and you have no costumes, upgrades, or collectibles from the first save. Most of the Kryptonite games I have played have had more than just this, so this is genuinely a bizarre omission. It would be so nice to find those last few collectibles or replay with all of my upgrades in a new suit, since I neglected to change it out, figuring I would have the chance to get replay footage, and the fact that I had otherwise wanted to jump right back in should make it clear I was truly let down by this discovery. All that being said, I don't want this review to end on such a sour note. When I said I enjoyed this game, I don't just mean in the sense that I could appreciate its niceties, or that it surpassed what could have been low expectations, like how Garfield's Nightmare surprised me by actually being a proper and competent game. I was legitimately into the game the whole time I played. The only reason it took me 3 sittings to get through the rough 5 hours I spent playing as thoroughly as I could was because I was forcing myself to take breaks. One of those was because I legitimately lost track of time and played later into the night than I had intended. Do you know how long it has been since a game made me do that? Sure, there have been times where I consciously looked at the clock and said, "Fuck future Charlie, he can deal with sleep deprivation tomorrow morning. I'm gaming." But it's been several years at the least since a game was clicking so well for me that the time just got away from me that badly. So even with its flaws, and even having to set expectations so reaching the end doesn't pull the rug out from under your feet the way it did mine, and even though Bucky is as sturdy as brown Lego pieces from the early 2000s, I legitimately think this game deserves a little more love sent its way. Captain America Super Soldier for the Nintendo DS is awesome. Get out there and start punching fascists. Hey, as always, I've got some very special thanks for my patrons, of whom I get to introduce 2 today. Thanks for joining on, Wood Collector. Absolutely love the name. And thanks as well, Angle, with the fun little face you typed into your name. You'll have to let me know if I have to pronounce the face in there a particular way. I couldn't figure it out. If you want to join these 4 fine folks in supporting the channel, you can do so through Patreon for as low as $1 a month. The first patron-exclusive video is already available. Here's a clip.
Alright, these suckers will never know what hit them.
If you can't swing that, but want to give a one-time donation, you can do so through Ko-fi, and links to both are in the description. You can also follow me through various social media. I have linked there too. Liking and commenting helps boost the video. The next episode of A Briefish History of Batman Arkham is underway, and as mentioned, I have a big project I'm so eager to announce soon, too. So a subscribe may do you some good, if you haven't done so already.